Lord, it's been 18 months since we've been together. Thank you. Thank you for this community that has touched us and held us together during this time of great difficulty. There's been a lot of grief and a lot of heartbreak and a lot of pain. But it is good to be together here, together for the first time in a long time. We're starting Isaiah, Lord, and we're going to need your help. We're going to need your help because this is difficult stuff in Isaiah. So bless us as we read this book and try to understand and comprehend it. These things we pray in the name of Jesus Christ, who is Lord and Savior. Amen. Okay. Now, question I have is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is it all right to leave this mask on?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody. For those of you who are new to the class, welcome here. If you will sign up, I got to send a little pad around. If you will put your name on an email on my list here, I will email you the an email after the class each week, so that you can so that it's a summary of the class, and we'll give you the location of the how to get to our Zoom. This is going to be recorded each week on Zoom. It's you can watch it on the I think it's going to be on YouTube.
You have a pen?
So you want a writing stick?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, now
That
I kind of recommend, because of the nature of this class, that you either attend or at least read the email each week. Because unlike the other classes that we've done, which is just goes from beginning to end, there's going to be a lot of background material. I'll start with the background material this morning. And part of the difficulty is that Isaiah, the prophets in general, are keyed to the historic text. We did Jeremiah a number of years ago, and we just went from beginning to end in Jeremiah, but Jeremiah only covers about 20 years, and it's all having to do with the exile into Babylon, exile to Babylon. This starts in 742 and goes all the way to about 450, and it's not in sequential order. So I'm gonna be jumping around a lot, so that it's going to be helpful for you to know the history. So let's, we're not going to be reading it from beginning to end. We have 30 classes. There are 66 chapters, 300 years of history, 3 empires, and 3 Isaiahs.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah. It will not be a verse by verse reading as we do in the New Testament, and you'll notice I'm working from an outline here that I didn't used to do, but I need to do it in this particular case. We could read it from beginning to end, but that wouldn't be very productive. Because we're going to jump around as the movement dictates, as the history dictates. And we'll look at, what I intend to do is present themes and historic events and literary units and investigate them generally in historic order. So it's not going to go from beginning to end. We're going to start chapter 6, for instance. We will pay attention to the New Testament links of all the Old Testament books This one is the one most quoted in the New Testament. So this is a significant book for the church. Here's what I hope by the time we finish this in June of next year, that we will accomplish this. First, we'll learn the history of the era of this 300 years, and we'll learn enough about that. Second, we'll learn what I call the themes of Isaiah. There are a variety of different themes. I hope to, and this is what I really hope to do, is to help you learn how to read a prophet. These are not in. It's different from reading an epistle or gospel or we read Samuel, etc., which has some kind of flow in it. So we have to identify certain things in a way we hadn't in the past. I want to look at the use of Isaiah in the New Testament. And I want to make sure that we can discuss this. This is a little more difficult, I think, because I'm trying to put a lot into the material. So I want to encourage people to speak up. And also you on Zoom, who are watching this by Zoom now, speak up. I think you can just speak up as you wish, or wave your hands or something like that, and I will try to recognize you.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do we know there are three Isaiahs? Three
Well,
different people?
I'll get to that. Okay, if I could. I recommend. I've never recommended this before, but I recommend that you folks read it at home. And if you read 2 chapters a week, you'll get through it by the end. What'll happen, though, is when you first start reading, you're not going to have a clue what it's about. And you're going to recognize a lot of passages. I've read that before. I've seen that before in the New Testament. But just persevere in reading it. Even if doesn't make any difference what you're reading in the Bible. The first time you're reading it, it's hard to make sense. I would recommend that you just persevere. And what'll happen over this reading that you're doing and the discussions and what we're presenting in class, it's going to begin to start making sense somewhere. I can remember when I was in seminary, I wanted to really study the Old Testament. That's what I was really there for. And I was reading all the class stuff and everything, and I was losing it. I just couldn't figure out what in the world was going on, how to understand and interpret this. Well, our professor had an augmented reading list. And I can remember to this very day, an article that he said he had us read called The Kerygma of the Yahwist. Don't ask. But I read that. It's a high scholarly argument by a guy named Von Rod, and I understood it.
Oh.
It was just kind of like the scales dropped from my eyes. So I would just encourage you to read it. And if you don't understand it, that's okay. But get the feel of it. And eventually you're going to get to the point where, yeah, that's what this is about. And you'll build, I think, a knowledge base as we go forward. I have some recommendations for you. First is that you get a Bible that has section readings. Let me see, I gotta find what I'm reading. I gotta find it here. excuse me. The technology is, I'm still working on this technology here.
Aren't we all?
Let's stop share here and try to pull this up. I thought I had it all set.
Yeah.
Back to, so. Sorry.
That's okay.
There we go. I hope I got it there. This should be it.
No, you've got to go to the yellow text.
Ah, thank you. There you go. Okay. I recommend that you, when you get a Bible, you can check them over here too, that you get a Bible that has certain features. One is this is Isaiah 6. We're going to start with Isaiah 6, incidentally. So we're coming back to this. Get one that has kind of little topical headings, because you can see this right here. This is a topical heading about the sending of Isaiah. It's about his call and his sending, stuff like that. So that's that will help you understand. Now, understand when you do this, that this is a decision of the, not the translator really, but of the publisher. The publishers will hire people to do this kind of stuff. So this on this one and this one right here, you got a sending of Isaiah. If any of you have the NRSV versions over there,
A vision of God in the temple.
yeah, something like that. What you will see is some kind of text, some kind of heading, and that will help you comprehend it. Second, you see this, the yellow here. This is a text that's in paragraph form, right? But this part right here is in poetic form. And the distinction on that is that you can, that this will help you understand that these are poetic. For instance, you've heard this a lot. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. All the earth is filled with his glory. If you've heard that, it's because we do it regularly during communion in the worship service. This is one of the major borrowings from Isaiah. These, and these are usually in parallel form right here. Listen carefully, but do not understand. And look intently, but do not perceive. You see this right here. There are parallel statements. Now, what's happened is that, and I'll show you a copy of the Isaiah text later. That's not what we have in the original. In the original, it's just line by line, just right across, actually from right to left in Isaiah. Yes,
What version are you displaying on the screen there?
this is a new Revised Standard Version. And I'm going to be sticking with that for the entire class. But this heading right here is a feature of the particular publication that I have. So I would recommend that you get one that has that differentiates between poetry and and paragraph form. We're going to see both of them, like you see in this case right here in Isaiah. One of the characteristics that we'll find out is that there's an expectation that divine speech will be in poetic form. So that's just one of that appears to be a literary norm from the ancient world. God speak in verse. So, okay. Any questions about this right now? And we're going to come back to this passage later. Okay, this is a critical, that's the first one we're going to really look
A
at.
tricky one, since you said that about verse. So if you saw this holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the holy is the Lord in Hebrew, would it rhyme?
No.
Okay.
Now, they don't do rhyming in Hebrew. The poetic form is parallelism.
So there's some kind of structure that you can see in it. If
Yeah,
saw
you
it.
can see. Now, understand that if you go to different versions or different editions or different publishers, etc., this poetry will not always be the same, because this is a decision of a combination of the publisher and the publisher's their scholars and the original translators. I have a version of the Revised Standard Version that doesn't have the poetic stuff at all. If you read the King James Version, you won't be able to tell one from another. So, what I recommend in terms of versions, one of these possible. This is the new Revised Standard Version here. That's what I'm showing you here, and that is a revision of the Revised Standard Version, which is about 1946 and 50 or so, done by the National Council of Churches. And it's been updated by basically language, does a lot of inclusive language and stuff. Also, it is the Revised Standard Version is a version that is a copy of the Revised Version, which was at the turn of the 20th century, or turn of the 20th century. So you have kind of families of translations. The New American Bible is a Roman Catholic one, but it's quite good. It's quite good. The New International Version is good. It's designed with a much more limited vocabulary. Its vocabulary is quite, it's intentionally designed for somebody perhaps with a high school education or less. But it is acceptable, and it does good work. I like the New Jerusalem Bible as well. Matter of fact, about 50 years ago, Virginia bought me a Jerusalem Bible. It's now a New Jerusalem Bible. It's a Roman Catholic version, and it's quite excellent. It is based more on Roman Catholic tradition.
Ed,
Yes,
is there a revised standard, a new revised standard version selected by the Presbyterian USA Church?
well, actually, the Pew Bibles are, I think, have a Presbyterian logo on them, but it's, the Presbyterian Church doesn't do something like that. They're not going to select the Bible as the official Bible.
Mhm.
So the answer to that one is no. There's another possibility for, I mean, you can, if you wish, you can go to various commentaries. I have used, this is the Oxford Annotated Bible. This is the most recent version. This is 2015. It's the 5th edition here. You're welcome to just look at that. Let's see if I can get this turned down here. I've got to go to the next page. The new revised standard version is there we go. This is this is the back of that right there. It's quite comprehensive, and it is worthwhile if you wish to go into it in more depth. The difficulty is that's about $35 right there, that particular version. You may be able to get it in paperback for less. You can get it online and through, you can get it on Amazon if you wish, or in Kindle. So that's, you might want to consider that. It's not necessary. The reason I particularly like this one, it is of the School of Interpretation of Higher Critical Studies, which is what I present. So it's going to be less theologically interpretive. It's going to look more like what you get here in class, and it's a good resource. That particular one is fairly expensive though. So, okay. So I think as we move through this, as I give you some historic background, you're going to start to have a better understanding. Okay. I didn't bring my, there we go. I didn't bring my my mouse. So this is not my ordinary.
Yeah, that's hard.
It's okay. It's okay. All right. This is the region. I'm going to start talking about the region here and the history of it. This Palestine, there's Jerusalem right there. And what you see up here are mountains. This is desert down here. This is less arid as you go north. And this is Mesopotamia right here. There's the Euphrates River here. Here's the Tigris River right there. Current day Baghdad is right where the two rivers approach each other, right here at Babylon. These mountains are really what define the region. Here are the Caucasus Mountains right here. North of the Caucasus is where you start in Russia. Russia is ordinarily north of the Caucasus. Incidentally, we're all called Caucasian. That comes from this mountain right here, because we come north of the mostly north of the Caucasus. This is modern day Turkey, and you see this plain right here, and it kind of leaks over into here, and then back down into here. this is a good horse country. And in fact, Solomon was probably buying horses from the Hittites and buying chariots from the Egyptians and putting them together. The reason I mention this is because this is how this forms a kind of a scoop. Damascus is right there. This is the Taurus Mountains. In order to get up into here, there's a pass right in here near Tarsus. These separate empires, these mountains. Mesopotamia in here between the rivers, it's watered, it's by these two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And because it's so dry, you need in order to grow for agriculture, it needs to be, you need water. And these rivers form sufficient water so that you can grow substantial amount of crops in this region here. Less here, more down here. And what happens is that this generated the development of cities and cities and kings and central authority so that they could organize to dig channels and tunnels and canals so that they could bring the water. So this is between the rivers. Babylon is there. It was earlier. Ashur and then Nineveh are here. These are the cities of the Assyrian Empire, and this region right here is the region of early empires. There is a constant fight between the Assyrians here and the Babylonians here. And in fact, in the middle of this historic period, the Assyrians are going to conquer the Babylonians. There's going to be a big fight here. This region up here, this whole area up here is called, is now today Iran. And you can see that it is it heads all the way to India, and the Persian Empire was in the time of in later times was probably the largest empire in the world. It went all the way to India. There's an empire right here called the Medes, and the Medes and the Persians are the folks that Cyrus brought together, and he's the one that liberated Palestine, the Jews from Israel, from exile in Babylon. These Hittites here are from the very early kingdom. They did a lot of horse work and cavalry work, and also chariots. They by biblical times, you see mention of Hittites, but not a lot, because they passed their peak around 1200. This region down here, of course, is Egypt, and this is all desert here, except for this region right here, which is watered by the Nile, which means that it is a breadbasket. Now, understand that historic times started about 3500 BC in Egypt. We have evidence that in 4000 BC, this desert was watered. We can see it there. And what happens is that this dried up and people congregated around the Egyptian, but around the Nile. And that became and still is a major urban region. And it's a very solid empire because it's easily controlled by a single entity. These folks over here in Mesopotamia were fighting with each other, and they had all kinds of city-states, etc. This region right here is Syria in the Old Testament. It's the modern region of Syria as well. And this is Canaan, and this is Palestine over in here, Palestine, Canaan. Now, there's a river, there's a fragment, a geological fault that goes right down here and down into Ethiopia. And in that you find the Jordan River and the Dead Sea about right there. And it follows this fault all the way south. The lowest point on earth is here at the Dead Sea. It is a powerful place. We'll see it a little bit later when we get to the more regional part. Now I want to briefly go through the history of this right here. History starts at about 2500 BC, maybe 3000. And the history is when you start seeing writing. Okay, that's a technical term. Prehistoric means there's no writing, so we don't have any histories. And the earliest empires were actually in here. And in fact, there is a new site found in Turkey that is Göbekli. Can't think of the first name of it. It goes back to 10,000 BC. It's an urban area. It's quite extraordinary. This the Hittites arose up in here and consolidated themselves. And by this time, there were other regions. Babylon was started up in this region right here, as did Assyria, the old Assyrian Empire. Egypt, of course, was here, and you had the beginnings of a Achaean Greek and here in Crete, and all this stuff arose fairly substantially by about 1500 BC. In about 1200 BC, all these collapsed. There was a general collapse of civilization around 1200 BC, and we don't know exactly why. We can see the evidence of it, all right? We can see the evidence of it. We know that the sea peoples came down and attacked Egypt. Some of these sea peoples were the Philistines, who came down from the north, and everything society just kind of dissolved. Urban society, not the town folk, not the farmers, but the urban society just collapsed. As I say, we don't know quite why, but for our purposes, this is critical. About 1200 BC. Well, the Exodus is dated about 1200 BC. These Israelites left Egypt and crossed over here and eventually landed up right there. What that means is that this happened right in the middle of a collapse of the authority and the power structure that were stabilizing things, right? David came to the throne about 1000 BC, right? And he and Solomon built an empire that was roughly this region here. It expanded substantially. One of the reasons it could expand substantially is that there are no big guys around to lean on. Right? No big guys around, and include Babylon continued on, and Ashur or Assyria continued on. Syria was a regional place. The Hittites fairly well declined after about 1200 BC. Egypt, of course, remains till this very day. Now, this is important because what's going to happen is around 750 BC, after about a 300-400 year place of opportunity, I guess, the Assyrians started moving west. And a major part of that move to the west, to the coast by the Assyrian Empire is what is exactly what the period of time that we're going to be talking about. The Assyrians is just, we're going to start reading the names of Assyrian kings. They're going to have chronicles, and these chronicles will mention what's going on in Palestine and Jerusalem, and they mention the kings. And so from about 750 BC and all the way down to about 400 BC, when the Persian Empire had started to, was pretty well established, we're going to see all kinds of political turmoil. Most, when we think of history, in biblical history, what we really read is Exodus and Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Judges and all those folks, right? And David and Solomon, but that's where we stop, usually. That's what we think about, except that the real history, the most complex part of history, in that period in which the theology that we know about started later. And the first 15 chapters, I think, of Kings is Solomon's. For 10 chapters, I guess, of Kings, first Kings of Solomon. The rest of it is all the rest of the stuff. And it's all the rest of the stuff that we're going to be studying when we study Isaiah. And it's mostly not known to us. We just copy over it. And we're going to have to, in order to interpret Isaiah, we're going to need to study that portion of history.
So the
Which
time period
includes-
of Isaiah is after David.
Pardon me?
The time period of Isaiah is after David.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes. Isaiah is going to start at 742. The kingdom, David was about 1,000, and I'll get to it in more detail later. The kingdom split at around 940 or about 940. So, okay, that's the prequel to what we're going to be seeing. There are 4 eras of Isaiah. All right. Starting in about 742 or 750, that's when the Assyrian king, the Assyrians want to go to the coast over here because that's where all the wealth is. This is where all the trade is. A lot of cities over here. And so if you want to really expand, get into the world, you go over there. This is where Phoenicia was. There's Byblos and Sidon. Beirut is right there. This is where you have access to the Mediterranean Sea and the wealth of the West at this time. So they go there and in order to, and that starts in what we call the Neo-Assyrian Empire. And it starts about 900, somewhere around 900. And the Assyrians originally go straight to the coast, straight to the coast, and then they start heading south. What's south? Egypt. Say, what's the route to Egypt? Well, it goes right through Palestine. And so therefore, this period starting in about 750 or so, 780, is a time of significant travel, attacks by the Assyrian Empire, and eventually The Babylonians are going to get into it, and then eventually the Medes and the Persians. So there's 4 areas. One is the northern Israel, Assyria conflict. And it starts in Isaiah in 742 and ends with the exile of the northern kingdom. We'll go through this in more detail in about 722, 721 by the Assyrians. They go in and just conquer them and drive and deport the congregation, the whole company. And then and during this period right here, there's going to be, I bet you didn't know, a war between the northern and the southern kingdoms, between Samaria and Jerusalem. Right? Before this, incidentally, is the era of Ahab, Jezebel, and all those folks. Okay, and then you're going to get into this after they exile and conquer Palestine or Samaria in the north, the 10 northern tribes. That's the area through which the route to Egypt goes. You can see the route go, if you're going to go from here and down this way, you're going to go down the coast. That's where the easy road is. That you can go down on the eastern side of these mountains and cut across. That's another route. That's called the King's Highway. And this is called the Way of the Sea. And those are the names of those routes, like Interstate 95. And so what happens is that they head south and after they knock off the northern kingdom, they start to turn south to Judah. Now, the difficulty is that there were just annual, there was a lot of war. And eventually they're going to try to capture Jerusalem. And one of the major events in the history of Israel and biblical history is their failure to take Jerusalem. And that's a significant part in the history of biblical and Jewish history. Eventually, what's going to happen, starting in about 690, is Assyria is going to decline. A major challenger is going to be Egypt. Another major challenger is going to be Babylon. And eventually, Assyria is going to disappear around 609, 612 BC. They're going to hang on for another 100 years or so. And with the rise of Babylon down here, Judah and Babylon, this is going to be the period of the exile right here. Now, we're not going to see a lot in Isaiah about this period here. But we are going to see the period the Medes and the Persians, the return from the exile and the resettlement of Jerusalem around 450. We studied, not last year, but the year before, I think, when we studied the
Jeremiah.
no, not Jeremiah,
Yeah,
but
I think it was Samuel.
we not, well, that's the period of Daniel afterwards. We studied the period after they can't think of the two books right now. We studied it in some length. Esther, Nehemiah.
Right, yeah.
So that's that's a long period of time. And what happened, what we'll see, and we see it, somebody asked the question, how we know. The content of Isaiah changes. We don't see a lot of this period here specifically, but what we do see is a substantial change starting at the end of this period. The message and the themes of Isaiah change from judgment to restoration to healing. And we can literally see it. And in fact, when we get down in here, Cyrus is going to be mentioned by name as the Messiah. So, okay. We got 7 or 8 minutes here. I want to talk about the ordinary life of the hoi polloi. Understand that the world was basically agrarian. The people, the economy was agrarian, and as the technology increased, it improved, they could start to grow sufficient amounts of food to allow urban development. That's necessary because you can't grow much in an urban setting. And when you do that, you get the development of classes of people who do not need to work in the fields. They've got spare time. And then you begin buildings, you begin literature, etc., learning all kinds of stuff. This began starting in about 2500 BC. By the time of Isaiah, and this stands mostly for the whole ancient world, is that most people just worked. They just worked. They didn't have much organization. There were cities. Power emerged from the cities. Great political power. And these, and economic power. And we're going to see the exploitation of this political and economic power. One of the truisms of living in the ancient world is that it was hazardous. It was just plain hazardous. These, what we know, and this happened all the way into the 19th century. In the fighting season, these emperors would set out on their wars. And they go out and conquer and then come back. And over a period of time, they developed administrative tools to allow them to govern larger and larger areas. We saw that in Esther and Nehemiah, where they appointed different governors in different regions. If you were an ordinary person in the time of Isaiah, your great fear was that somebody's going to come in and just beat you up. They're going to come in through conquest. They're going to knock down walls. They're going to take your fields, etc. This kind of, it was totally out of your control. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the big guys. The Philistines, the arch enemy of Israel, right? This was a group of sea peoples, we call them sea peoples, that migrated into the plain district, down in the plain of Palestine. And they had chariots and they had iron. They had these kinds of weapons. And it's likely that there weren't a very large group. They didn't leave a lot of stuff behind, but they did develop cities, other places that we know about, and some of which are still there today. But probably a very small group controlled. It's kind of like the mob moving in. They had steel, they had chariots, they they could make your life miserable. And they ruled. So that's a reality. And so you could easily be plundered or controlled by somebody you didn't like, or somebody foreign for you. A war was a constant. Then there were the natural problems: famine, crop failures, locusts. And then there were the political economics of corruption. These kinds of things meant that the ordinary person was just not in control, full control of their lives. And so they lived in a kind of a world in which they had to pray a lot, because they couldn't control their own environment and their own life. So what are your hopes for a time for this? Peace, prosperity, justice, equity, protection of the poor. These are the kinds of hopes that people have. What we're going to see in Isaiah is are these issues on the fears, on the one hand, and the judge, and it's going to come out as judgment. And on the other times, a great hope for the future is that things are going to be peaceful. And this reached folks in a different level than we can know now. I mean, look at us right now. There are wars and stuff all over the world. We just don't have a sense of that. And we kind of agree that it's, world peace is something everybody wants. Every Miss America wants that. And we all want it. But the world is so different now than it was then. So in order to understand Isaiah, we're going to have to look at those fears and concerns and hopes and joys and try to put it into some kind of context. And it's all there in Isaiah. Okay, folks, thank you. Thank you.